Final Fantasy is full of incredible emotional moments, but there are some that just have really stuck with me throughout the years. From the original 8-bit to 16-bit games that I played when I was growing up, even now with the most recent release with Final Fantasy 16, this series has had some real serious emotional gut punches. So in today's video, I'm talking about my top 10 emotional moments in Final Fantasy. And before we get to that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Do you agree with my list? I would actually love to know your list. We might have the same number one. And just a warning, there will be spoilers about endings and certain moments here. So tread carefully if you haven't played these games before. Let's start with number 10, Galif's sacrifice. I really think that this moment would have been a serious change of pace for things in Final Fantasy. We did have some emotional moments in Final Fantasy IV, which was the game before, with Palom and Porom turning to stone, but a lot of the heavyweight stuff that came in that game were reversed by the time the credits rolled, so it kind of just negated all that. But Galif's final stand is one of those early Final Fantasy moments that really just are going to stick with you. There's nothing seriously overly dramatic about it. It's just sprites and text boxes, and this scene just really delivers what it's trying to do. So Galif's in a fight, and he still keeps going even after his HP drops to all but zero, and watching him refuse to fall feels just surprising in a way that you don't expect from something in a 16-bit game of that time. And overall, I think this simplicity works really well in its favor. You're not distracted by a lot of stuff happening here. You're just watching Galif push past his limit to try and protect his friends. He's literally dying, protecting the next generation, really just certain about what he's doing, and there's something really grounded about it. And I think that this game trusts you to feel the weight of that choice without having to over-explain it. I mean, of course, because of that, he passes down his stats and everything to his granddaughter, Kryl, who joins as your party member in his stead. And I think overall, this is a moment that has aged incredibly well, and it's proof that emotional impact like this does not need flash. It just needs some serious conviction. Number 9, the final campsite scene in Final Fantasy 15. The campsite scene at the very end of Final Fantasy 15 is painfully real. I mean, this whole game is like a glorified road trip full of fun, lighthearted moments, and suddenly everything really just kind of slows down here, and the game is kind of on like a downward trajectory, not in a bad way, but things are just kind of, moving a little bit slower paced, and Noctis is trying to just say what he needs to say, and you can hear in his voice that either he doesn't know how, or he's having a hard time, or maybe just having a hard time accepting everything here. It's just 4 friends sitting around a campfire knowing that things will never be the same going forward. And what makes this really hurt, I think, is, the time that you spent with your friends here. The game invested so heavily in everyday moments that when this goodbye comes, this final turning point here comes, it's personal. It's not dramatic in like an overly theatrical way, but it's really intimate. It's about friendship. And honestly, it might be the most human moment in Final Fantasy. I think it's really relatable and a really seriously impactful moment in Final Fantasy. Number 8, Cloud's true self. Now, this is one that I'm looking forward to seeing handled in Final Fantasy Remake Part 3. So the live stream sequence where Cloud finally pieces himself back together is a real powerful shift for the story. I mean, up until that point, he's been hiding behind a version of himself that never really made sense, and watching him confront these broken memories and admit the truth is uncomfortable, yes, and it's all done through the guidance of Tifa, who's there to help guide him in his subconscious. And it's not about saving the world in that moment, even though there's definitely some things happening in the real world. It's about watching Cloud facing who he really is. And what I love about this whole scene is it's built on vulnerability. Cloud is not becoming somebody new. He's accepting who he's always been, flaws and all. And it's a real human moment that I think gives the rest of the story more weight, because now you know exactly who's standing at the center of it. Of course, Cloud is this moody mercenary, but there's more to it, and there's a reason he's like that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video, but everything that's built up into that point, may not make sense, but once you get to this true personality reveal, it all clicks. Number 7, Vivi's last words. Final Fantasy IX has some seriously emotional moments, but the one that has always stuck out to me is his ending, more or less, because his story overall has some pretty heavy themes like mortality, for, like, obviously somebody who's really younger, identity, struggling to accept that he's manufactured, being a black mage, and overall what it means to exist when you know your time is limited. And it does it with so much heart. And by the time that the ending rolls around and his words, his final letter to Zidane begins to scroll on screen, you really just, man, it blows you away. You've watched him wrestle with questions most characters would probably avoid, and somehow he comes out the other side with this gentle sense of understanding and acceptance. He's very brave. And there's obviously some sadness here, but also peace on the other hand. The game doesn't try to fix his situation. He accepts it. It's a very emotional moment, and he's so brave and so mature for somebody so young. So Vivi's whole story arc leads up into that point and is definitely a tearjerker. Number 6 is Clive's fate from Final Fantasy 16. So hey, spoilers here for Final Fantasy 16 if you haven't finished it, but I did warn you. So Clive's ending works because of everything he's been through to get there. Literally, his whole entire life is defined by loss. His home is destroyed. His status as, being a royal of his kingdom is destroyed. His brother is lost, and even his own sense of identity is just gone. And he carries a lot of guilt for years and fighting for revenge and all this stuff. So when the finale arrives, it's not about defeating God, really. It's about rejecting the idea that his suffering was all that he was meant for. And when he decides to take on, the final boss and ending the cycle, it's really heavy. He's tired on the beach at the very end. And that's what makes this whole thing very powerful. And whether you think he's truly gone or not, I still think that the emotional payoff is the same. He breaks the system that hurt him and gives others the future that he never had. And after all of that pain, he still chooses hope. And that choice feels like the true resolution of his journey. And even, some of the goodbyes right before the ending of the game, saying goodbye to Jill, saying goodbye to Torgal for the last time, and even what happens with Joshua as well before he does fight Ultima. All those moments are incredibly emotional, and Final Fantasy 16 had me bawling, honestly. And shout out to Ben Starr for doing such a fantastic job. I met Ben Starr not too long ago, so it was great to finally meet him and thank him for these performances because they were so special and they meant quite a lot to me, and it was a great resolution for me. Now, hang on, before we get any further, I also wanted to let you know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular are not subscribed. So if you like these kind of videos and you want more content every week in your YouTube subscription feed, I would love to have you. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and also I would love to know your comments on today's video as well. Anyway, more video right now. Number 5, Tidus learns the truth of the journey. So there's a clear shift halfway through Final Fantasy X when Tidus learns what exactly this pilgrimage means. Up until then, yes, there is a optimism carrying the group forward. Spira feels colorful and alive, even with Sin kind of looming in the background. But then everything kind of hits the fan, and suddenly everything feels pretty heavy. What makes this moment work really well is Tidus himself. I mean, you kind of know that Tidus is new to this world, and so are we, playing this game for the first time anyway. We're learning everything through his eyes, more or less. And when we find out that Yuna is the one that's going to be sacrificed at the end of this journey, he doesn't say, yes, okay, and accepts it. He absolutely gets so mad, he pushes back, and he refuses to believe that this is the only way. And that reaction makes him feel really real and human, even though, if you know, you know. And that makes the ending hit a lot harder later on. So you remember how badly he wanted another answer. And that emotional thread runs all the way to that finale. And you find out that he was the answer all along. Number 4, Celes on the cliff in the world of ruin. So Final Fantasy VI divided into 2 parts. We have the world of balance and then the world of ruin. Kefka ends up destroying the world halfway through the game. And instead of picking any party member, we start as Celes, which is a real interesting turning point. And she wakes up alone on a beach, and everything just feels unbearable. The world has ended, her friends are gone or missing, and there's no clear path forward. And you just spend that little stretch of the game just surviving with her. You find Sid surviving in this shack. You're trying to save him, and things are pretty dire. But there's a moment here that happens that it's just a complete disappearance of hope. And I don't think that Final Fantasy as a series has dared to do anything this bold. she loses all hope here. She walks up to the edge of this cliff and she questions her life. It's just overwhelming grief and isolation, really. And I think that's why the scene hits so hard. It certainly doesn't sensationalize what she's feeling, and it shows how crushing hopelessness can be. And she jumps off. And in that moment, you think, oh my gosh, she's taking her own life. But she wakes up, and the first thing she sees is a bird with locks, bandana. And suddenly she has hope again, thinking, oh my gosh, my friends are actually out there. So it doesn't erase that low point at all. It just makes that recovery feel real going forward. And I just think it's not necessarily about despair, but it's about how hard it is to keep going and how powerful it is when you actually try to keep pushing forward from rock bottom. So a seriously powerful and impactful moment in Final Fantasy. And if you haven't experienced it for yourself, I would highly recommend you do so. Number 3, the ending of Final Fantasy X. Now, if you've watched my channel and you've watched any of my ranking videos, you'll know that Final Fantasy X was my top rated story, and it's got many, many impactful moments for me. And this was the number one thing for me that totally sealed the deal. It was the ending. It's such a bittersweet ending in like every sense of the word. Yes, there is victory, but it comes at the cost, that the game refuses to undo until we get to Final Fantasy X-2, which we'll talk about in a moment. But this farewell between Tidus and Yuna, it hurts, man. It hurts once you realize that Tidus was the one that was there to help save the day, and he starts to fade away instead of Yuna being the sacrifice. It's a real gut punch. Everything that the story has been building towards, sacrifice and acceptance and choosing to move forward even in the face of adversity, all kind of is tied in a knot here. And even though there's hope in these final images, Yuna speaking to the crowd and acknowledging that sin is gone and we've lost some friends along the way. It's great that there's hope, but that loss is still super loud, and it lets it exist alongside that happiness, which is why this ending has stayed with me for like 20 plus years. And speaking of Final Fantasy X-2, kind of an honorable mention here, like a 3.1 or whatever, but that 100% ending where Tidus can come back, reborn in the waters, and finds Yuna at the very end of the game. It's such a incredible emotional moment for me, and I remember bawling in my room when I was a kid because I was just so in love with the idea of these two characters finding each other again and loving each other. So Final Fantasy X overall is an incredible story. The ending is insane, and the secret ending of X-2 is such fan service for me. I love it. Number 2 is Aerith's fate in Final Fantasy VII. Now, this is a moment that, if you know anything about Final Fantasy VII, this might be the only thing you know, because it's just transcended the game itself. But what makes it truly devastating isn't just the shock factor, it's like how suddenly it happens. There's no long dramatic warning. 1 second Aerith is praying, everything looks normal, and then boom, Sephiroth just comes down and impales her with his sword. It feels so unreal, and it's like whiplash watching this scene unfold. And if you're somebody who's played this game back in the 90s, chances are you never would have seen this coming. And the game does not let you sit with it. You fight a boss like 5 seconds after she dies, so you're still processing what happens, and then you got to fight in Genova. This whiplash is probably intentional, and it mirrors the chaos the characters are feeling. One of the most impactful moments in the series for sure. Number 1 is Zack's last stand in Crisis Core. Now, I'm a fan of Final Fantasy VII. We know what happens to Zack in that game, and when Crisis Core was announced, we knew exactly how it was going to end, but we still played it anyway. And I'm telling you, it was such an incredible moment. Watching Zack fight against impossible odds, still smiling, still believing everything will work out. It's heartbreak in slow motion. And somehow we still played Crisis Core, aware of how this ends, and it makes every step toward it even worse, honestly. And overall, what makes it unbearable, in terms of how his fate ends up, is how genuine he is. Zack is not cynical. He's not a bitter character. He just keeps getting back up and fighting on. As the memories fade away one by one during that final stretch, it stops feeling like a boss fight or something like that and starts feeling like, much more personal. It's not a death scene. It is like the true loss of innocence, and it reshapes how you see everything that follows in Final Fantasy VII. I mean, I played the original Crisis Core on my PSP in like 2007 or 8. I bawled at the ending. I played Crisis Core Reunion thinking I could be a tough guy at the ending. Nope, I bawled at the ending. it's the biggest gut punch in Final Fantasy VII for me. And I'm happy to see Zack kind of live on, even if it is in an alternate timeline. So Zack's last stand, it's always going to do it for me. So there's my top 10 emotional moments in Final Fantasy. I would love to know yours, so leave your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching today. We'll see you guys on another video very soon. Bye-bye.